Japan by River Cruise is made possible thanks to your donations at japanbyrivercruise.com and thanks to the generosity of our corporate sponsors. This is a message from PR firm Exotic for Profit International.
Here at Exotic for Profit, we're proud of our proven track record in rebranding pedestrian things as Asian and exotic to help them pop in a Western market. If you've ever enjoyed okonomiyaki or Japanese pizza, then you're familiar with our work. So if you're publishing a book on hospitality, let us triple your sales by rebranding your trite ideas as the Eastern art of omotenashi. Have a bullshit blog article about accepting imperfection? We'll stick a word like wabi-sabi in the title and bait you up some sweet clicks. Our negative PR can help you sell your racist fear-mongering as well. The Chinese virus? Asian murder hornets? Yeah, that was us. As a special offer exclusively for Japan by River Cruise listeners, we'll throw in one copyrighted, uniquely Japanese word free with any paid PR consultation. Choose between gaman, the untranslatable word meaning patience, wa, the untranslatable word meaning peace, or kombini, the untranslatable word meaning place to buy fried chicken from an exhausted Nepalese exchange student at 3 a.m. Act fast. These words won't be untranslatable for long. So contact us today via the cutting-edge, yet also traditional Japanese voice messaging technology, the Denwa. Hello, Brian, and welcome back to Japan by River Cruise. I'm Bobby Judo.
And I'm Ollie Horn.
And joining us this week is Andy Curtin. Andy is a stand-up comedian and podcaster who founded the first full-time comedy club in Shanghai and is now the head of comedy for Live Nation Asia. He's toured Asia with Jim Gaffigan, Jim Jeffries, and worked with acts including Kevin Hart, Dave Chappelle, and God Elmaleh, and is the only Australian national on record to have survived a bank-to-bank swim across the Shinano River.
Hi.
Andy, thank you for being on the show.
You're welcome.
On this week's show, the Japanese government is releasing guidelines for resuming social interactions. Because if there's anyone who knows how to interact socially, it's a Japanese bureaucrat. We'll break down those social interaction guidelines for you, including what percentage of them involve using taxpayer funds to entertain your mistress. Also, rural areas of Japan like Ibaraki and Gunma are asking people not to visit during Golden Week to avoid corona infections, a move that could be considered a waste of all the money they've spent on promoting tourism this year, except for the fact that it's a waste when they spend money promoting tourism any year. Plus, Ollie's got your weekly River Cruise recommendation. Ollie?
Yes, this week's recommendation is good news for scuba diving fans. The Okinawan River Princess, recently in the news for installing the industry's first ever on-deck mini-golf courses, has partnered with a scuba diving gear rental firm to offer discounted suit rental packages. The company has asked us to point out that this move has nothing to do with the rumours that they've lost all of their golf balls already, but have said that it would be helpful if while passengers were diving, they kept their eyes peeled.
Plus, with the news of the state of emergency extension threatening to sink their businesses, some river cruise operators are now just barely treading water. Later in the show, we'll have a special message for those of you in the industry who are struggling to stay afloat from a suicide prevention counselor who is pretty unhappy with the tone we're striking here. But first, soap talk. Ollie, how's your week?
It's been a good week. I've become an academic all of a sudden. It's been many years since I've been reading law journals, but I've started to write an article.
You weren't an academic after the law degree. It's now.
Now I've got all this time in lockdown. I've decided to write an article on the copyrightability of stand-up material. I've got a friend who I won't mention for legal reasons, who's in a dispute with a joke book publisher. And it astonishes me how little comedians know about what the law says about their output.
I think I saw you posting about this on Facebook, asking for people's experiences with having a joke stolen. And you're writing an article on whether or not jokes are actually copyrightable?
Yeah, that's basically it. There are certain norms which the stand-up world has adopted, which means that we never really needed copyright protection. Because if someone steals a joke, I mean, Andy will tell us, right, as someone that both performs and book shows.
And frequently steals material. Andy knows all about stealing jokes, don't you, Andy? What are you trying to say? What is this? What is this? Is this what this is really about?
But it's true, right? If you know that someone's a joke thief, then they just don't get booked, right? You know, they're ostracized from the comedy community. But what happens is once people that kind of exist outside of the stand-up world start appropriating this material, suddenly those kind of cultural norms break down, and that's when the law maybe needs to intervene. And comedians just don't realize that even a single joke is a piece of work which is copyrighted. They don't even need to register it. If they've recorded it, written it down somewhere, it's protected legally.
What about the enforcement, though? That's the problem.
Yeah, I guess that's true of any part of the law, though, right? The law is only as good as its enforceability. I mean, basically, the one problem that you have is the question of damages, right? If someone's stolen your joke, you need to show that you've suffered some loss, or you need to seek statutory damages. And it just hasn't been tested in a court. No court has said, well, a joke is worth $100, or you need compensation of $1,000 for your reputational damage or whatever.
Speaking of loss in terms of stand-up comedy, Ollie, I understand that Andy is the reason that nobody turned up to your Pig in Japan performance in Tokyo. Is that true, Andy?
Well, I was one of several reasons.
Let's list the reasons, please.
Ollie, well, let's start from the beginning. Ollie's act. No.
Half of which he stole from my act.
Should have stolen it from Dave Chappelle. I think it would have gone a bit better.
Ollie had a show called Pig in Japan that he was touring all around the world. And when he came to do it in Tokyo, he'd booked a venue and a date to do it in Tokyo, right?
Oh, no. It was much worse than that.
Oh, yeah, no. The story is way worse than it sounds.
I'm the reason he was in Tokyo.
Yeah, so I wasn't planning on being in Tokyo. I'd booked a flight to go to Tokyo under the pretense that I was going to be opening for Jim Gaffigan.
But our Japan team gave Ollie a call and said, "Hey, buddy, can you send us your visa?" And he was like,
I was like,
I don't have a visa. Why would I have a visa?
Visa schmeezer.
As what we thought was a resident of Fukuoka for many years, somehow didn't have a visa.
Well, I did have a visa, but I didn't have one which allowed me to work. I mean, that was the problem. That in my final 3 months of being in Japan, I didn't have the whatever it is, Tokide Katsudo, or whatever the stamp you need in order to do work.
You were transitioning out, and so you'd gone from a work visa to a tourist visa for your last 3 months.
It wasn't actually a tourist visa. It was an extension of the Shushoku Katsudo visa which I was on, which was ostensibly I was job hunting for a year.
You're allowed to job hunt and not to work.
That's exactly it.
I didn't realize I was booking a refugee at the time. So
Had you not seen his clothes?
Yeah, good, fair point. Anyway, so Ollie's like, it'll be fine, right? I'm like, mate, I don't think you understand how these theaters work. There's no chance we can let you in the backstage without the right visa.
Yeah, well, I thought we could get that stamp. Anyway, the bottom line is the flights were booked to Tokyo without a gig for me to do. But I thought, well, I'm going to make the most of it. I'd been planning to do my Pig in Japan show at some point in Tokyo. I thought, well, why not do it prematurely? So I booked 7 days in Tokyo, and I thought I'll go and watch the Jim Gaffigan show. No doubt Andy will give me a free ticket. Spoiler alert, he didn't, without a fight.
I offered a fair discount.
And then 5 or 6 days later, I booked in to do my show at Good Heavens, which is the kind of main comedy venue in Tokyo for acts of my level. Not only that, Steve Bougea, who's a UK act, a fantastic act, was in town and had offered to open for me. So it was going to be a great show. We were going to have a lot of fun. Plus, it was just before I was about to take the show to the Fringe. And so it would have been a great chance to, test the material, get Steve's feedback. He's an expert storyteller. It was going to be great. Then I get another message from Andy saying, "Hey, Ollie, Dave Chappelle's in town." So now I'm thinking, great. Well, what we'll do is we'll definitely sort out the visa then. And I can not only open for Jim Gaffigan, but also maybe close for Dave Chappelle. And then Andy says when the date is, and he basically Dave Chappelle had decided to pick a fight with me and picked exactly the same day as my Good Heavens show. And I don't want to judge who the winner and who the loser is, but let me put it this way. Dave Chappelle picked a fight with the wrong guy.
I mean, I completely agree. Dave Chappelle picked a fight with the wrong guy because you did not put up much of a fight. I mean, there's no question about it.
Even people that had booked tickets did not turn up. Presumably they were there sat watching Dave Chappelle.
Let me ask you this, Ali. How did Steve Bougea enjoy Dave Chappelle's show?
Well, Steve Bougea had also tried to book his own filming a special, I guess you call it, At Good Heavens.
Yes.
And nobody came to that either. So I was the most popular promoter in Tokyo for that week.
Well, it's not fair to say that no one came, but there had to be some very creative artistic choices about where the cameras were to make it look full.
The crazy thing is that both of them had their families there and just randomly bumped into each other in the street in Kyoto.
No way.
Yeah, imagine that. You know, just cruising around the street. You know, Kyoto's not a lot of foreigners in Kyoto, and then two of the world's top 10 comedians just bump into each other.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Probably top 5,
Man,
actually.
Imagine if I were there as well.
I'm just trying to imagine it.
Bobby, did we get any mail this week?
Yes, we got some interaction on Twitter in regards to the last episode. Bob Worley, he wrote in response to our last episode, and he says, curious about something. I listened to the episode where we discussed Okamura Takashi's joke about women having to turn to sex work because they'll be destitute because of the financial situation with COVID-19. He says, I listened to the episode and you mentioned that some people defended it as a joke, but there is no joke there. But Japanese humor, in my opinion, is rather adolescent. So would this joke fit under that? Not defending what he said, just curious. He goes on, in Japan, the mainstream comedy seems to allow for more juvenile style fart joke comedy, which makes me feel while this might not be a joke, it might be more expected or accepted for comedians to say or talk about things like he did, not saying it's right, but thinking it's a general culture of badness. Does any of that make sense?
First, I'm going to jump right in and say that I don't think it's fair to say that fart joke comedy is necessarily juvenile. In fact, the first 10 minutes of my new show is me talking about holding in a fart, and it's very intelligent.
He says juvenile fart joke comedy. So I think he's specifying fart jokes which are juvenile, which exempt you.
Thank you.
So if we accept that Japanese humor is more adolescent and these kinds of topics are more accepted and expected, is that the reason that the common defense is that he's just joking when he said this?
While it might be true that Japanese humor does have a slightly more adolescent and playful bent, my feeling is, and I don't mean this specifically about Bob, but generally I think foreigners get the wrong idea about Japanese comedy because the comedy which they're exposed to is mainstream comedy. Whereas if you're a comedy fan, you can dig deeper and find people that do talk about political issues and, you know, are slightly more linguistically dexterous and don't just rely on slapstick, blah, blah, blah. But I don't think it's a defense in this case because the joke which he was attempting to make was nothing to do with being juvenile or silly. It was making what he thought was a salient point that one of the effects of the pandemic is that there are going to be more beautiful prostitutes. So I just don't think that he was operating on that silly frequency. So I don't think that's an excuse.
Yeah, I think the point for me here is that he was saying it sincerely. When we say there wasn't a joke there, he was saying something that he meant. And if you're in a conversation with people who think that and agree with you, then you might all be laughing as you say it. It might be a fun, entertaining conversation. But it's akin to someone saying something racist or sexist, and then when no one laughs, goes, lighten up, it was just a joke. You said something you meant.
Yeah, but maybe it was just the wording. Like maybe he said, hey, this virus is so bad. If these girls don't become whores, they won't get any noodles.
I didn't know that we could make this comment any worse. But Andy.
Yeah. Thank you for giving us a perfect example of how you could have phrased that horribly offensively.
By the way, where's the most disappointing about that whole thing is it didn't actually have a fart joke in it. I was waiting for the fart joke.
I actually thought the same thing when I read this tweet. I was
what
like,
if he'd said it and then farted? Would that be a joke?
I think that would be more in line with the style of Japanese comedy that Bob Worley is used to watching. That's
Imagine
how you
if this
punctuate your
guy
joke.
just straight face was like, you know, they're not going to be able to earn money, so they might have to become prostitutes. Like, that would be pretty funny.
Well, there's a reason that fart jokes are mainstream in Japan. They appeal to everyone.
Plus, everyone's in elevators a lot, so it's relevant.
Should we take a look at the news? Bobby, Judo, what's in the news this week?
I'm actually very glad that we have Andy on as a guest this week for this particular news story, because one of the things in the news is that the Japanese government is starting to ease the curbs on social contact, and they're starting to reopen public facilities. So, Andy, you're in Hong Kong, and I think you're a little bit ahead of us on the timeline here. What's going on in terms of the reopening of the economy and society over there?
Yeah, well, like last weekend, they had the beaches were just packed. I mean, more like packed like Chinese New Year. Like you'd never want to go to a beach that packed at any time. Forget about the virus. The bars are all opening up now, and city's coming back online. And this
is because you're past the danger, you're past the risk of infection.
We haven't had a case in the community, I think, for 3 weeks or something.
Oh wow!
Yeah, they don't muck around. When they lock down here, they really make it happen. You know, people are saying, oh, I don't know if humans will feel comfortable venturing out again. Have a look at mainland China and Hong Kong. As soon as anyone got even a whisper of being allowed out again, they sprinted outside and hung out in crowds.
And are people washing their hands and wearing masks?
I'm not. Yeah, they are. No, but people here wear masks a lot. You know, people are still there's a very high percentage of people wearing masks still, but I feel like that's a small consolation given that they're able to go back and live again and be around people. People don't like to not be around people. Ultimately,
it's funny that you said I am, as long as kind of taking the position. Well, if everyone else wear a mask, then I'll be fine. The news that came out of the UK this week is that Neil Ferguson, who was given the title Professor Lockdown. He was the government's advisor on basically the modelling for the virus. It was reported that he had his girlfriend, who was a married woman herself, visit him at his home twice during the lockdown. And one of the times that she visited was on the same day that he said it's really important we all stay at home. We can't do it, can we? Like, there's a reason why, for example, in Germany, there's a law which says if you try and escape from prison, then you're not going to be criminally punished for that because it's human nature to want to escape. No one wants to do this, and we can't just admit it.
I just can't believe that a British politician would be a womanizing hypocrite. It's a bit of a stretch.
No. He was an academic, which is why he's sexy, and which is why this week, while I'm writing my quasi-academic paper, I'm the hottest man in town.
So, Andy, how much of what you're seeing do you think is a reaction to this pent-up desire to go out and socialize? Do you think people are doing the things that they've been wanting to do the whole time? Or
yeah, I mean, people have been going loopy staying at home. The weather's getting pretty warm here. I think a huge part of it is people just being desperate to go out and get back to the life that they had before.
And that's after, I mean, you haven't had a case in 3 weeks, you said. Florida, if you look at America, there are people who, they've announced that they're expecting 3,000 deaths a day, and people are still, as soon as they get the chance, they're all rushing to the beaches and the rallies and the protests and things like that.
I think it's really funny to look at different countries, how they justify it. So like this article you sent me, the government was talking about, I think it was public fatigue from quarantine. So they're like,
quarantine
the issue
fatigue.
here is that, the issue here is that we're tired. Whereas the Americans are like, no, the issues are rights. The issues are, people just want to go out. I just love the Japanese are like, we're just really tired. That's it. I was talking to William Childress, who's in Atlanta, Georgia, and he said people have just given up trying to isolate. He said they're all the beauty salons are operating like speakeasies now. They got boards. People sneaking in the back to get their nails done.
Yeah.
So there's a chance that you get arrested by a police officer that just happens to notice that your feet are impeccably smooth.
There he goes. Those toenails didn't paint themselves. You're under arrest.
I'm arresting you for looking fabulous, sir.
Yeah.
Well, guilty as charged.
I'm arresting you for looking well coiffed.
I think you.
That is not. See, there you go. That wasn't me. For the record, let it be known that fart came from the mouth of Ollie Horn.
You set it up. I mean, you floated that softball across the plate.
No, coiffed. I don't know how you pronounce it in your country. For us, that's what.
Quaffed.
Talk about your hair.
Well,
your
quaffed.
Hair.
A queef is a different thing.
Don't bring your dirty American accent in here. You guys can't pronounce anything.
Do you really pronounce it queefed?
You're damn right I do. You should see how I get haircuts.
Stick to your guns all the way down.
No, that's an American thing, to stick to your guns.
Yeah, it's a very American expression.
And it's a very British thing to make a pun. So we're all on brand right now.
This is a podcast about Japan, so let's jump back into the Japanese news real quick. They've extended the state of emergency until the end of the month, and at the same time, they're starting to reopen public facilities. And one of my favorite sentences in this article is that they're easing their requests for slashing social contact, and the government is going to be releasing guidelines on how to resume social activities. The idea of the government releasing guidelines on how to resume social activities is hilarious to me.
Have they got some mascot reminding people how to make jokes, how to encourage people to down their drinks?
They do actually. They do have a social distancing mascot. It's called Don't Touch Kun, and they just borrowed it from the anti-train molesting campaign.
I love that they said interpersonal contact. You're not allowed to do you can do intrapersonal contact, but not interpersonal contact. So basically you can put a finger in your own butt, but you're not allowed to touch someone else.
Especially not with that finger.
I love how like earlier on in this podcast, I made one fart joke and you guys are like, shit, we better move to the next section. Now Ollie's face sounds like a friggin' taco convention.
It's really funny. It is really funny.
I love how there's the two comedians on here have lowered the level of humor to the absolute, which I'm fine with, you know. But Bobby's keeping us. Bobby's the adult in the room right now, I think.
I'm trying to be. I'm
Bobby's got a career to maintain.
At least publicly facing. I'm trying to be the adult.
Well, there's a risk that people will learn to get too social because people are worried that Golden Week, people are going to go absolutely crazy.
Yeah, we are in the middle of Golden Week. That's another one of the big news stories this week. The rural areas in Japan are afraid that the coronavirus is going to be popping up and they're going to be seeing spots of infection during Golden Week as people travel. Because people leave the big cities and go on vacations to more remote destinations, but also it's another big time of the year when people go home to visit their families. So the bulk of cases in Japan, there's 4,500 confirmed cases in Tokyo, where most prefectures in the country have reported less than 100. They've actually got a quote here in this article from a governor in Miyagi who said, "My children are in Tokyo and Aichi, but I told them not to come home. If we let our guard down now, we'll see clusters of infection quickly pop up." So you've got like parents and grandparents discouraging their children and grandchildren from coming home to visit.
Of course, some of the measures do work, right? In Fukuoka, they chopped down all of those flowers so people wouldn't go and visit the outdoor flower garden.
Yeah, not only in Fukuoka, there are a couple of famous places around Japan where the fields of flowers draw huge tourist numbers every year. And to prevent those people from coming, they just killed all the flowers. They've chopped them all down this year. So people aren't showing up to these annual tourist destinations. And the Mainichi newspaper here in Japan is very, very upset about. Newspapers are typically supposed to be objective in their coverage of the news, but we've discovered this week that the Mainichi frickin' loves whirlpools. This was just a hilarious headline to me. The headline is, "Spectacular whirlpools in Western Japan go unseen as state of emergency continues."
But it is accompanied by a photograph of those whirlpools plastered on their website.
Nobody's watching them. These are, I guess, it's the popular. They're whirlpools. They're in a strait between Tokushima Prefecture, the cities of Naruto and Awaji Island in Hyogo Prefecture. It's this big strait out in the ocean that the water currents coming together create these whirlpools that they call them the Naruto
if you've ever been on a log flume, it looks exactly like the departure area before the log flume climbs up the hill.
It's a big swirl in the water, and this is their peak season.
Is this actually a thing that people should be going to see?
It's something that they go to see every year. Whether or not they should is another question.
Oh my good Lord. I'm just blown away. Like, I think if your idea of a holiday is to watch some water swirling around, you know, maybe you need to die.
You might. I don't think you realize what podcast you're on right now.
I do find it funny that the idea of an emergency is stretched so thinly that they're kind of officially saying it is still an emergency, but acting like it isn't. And that's just not, I think I've said this on the podcast before, that's not how emergencies work, right? An emergency is supposed to respond to an emotion, right? Like you're supposed to do something with a sense of urgency. You can't declare an emergency and not act like it's an emergency. It's like Michael Scott in The Office saying, "I declare bankruptcy," and that having no legal effect whatsoever.
I want to, what other emergencies are there where halfway through everyone's told they can start touching each other more? I want to check out those emergencies. You know, someone's getting a heart attack and just as they've resuscitated them, they're like, "All right, you can grab boobs, but no nipples. All right, we can have some."
Wake him up. Do anything you can.
What about the woman that got turned away when she was in labor?
Yeah, yeah. There was a woman she lives in Chiba Prefecture, and she was visiting family in Iwate, which is a northern rural prefecture. And she went into labor, and she was turned away from 2 hospitals because people were afraid she might have the virus. She had to go through 3 hospitals before she was admitted and gave birth. And the kicker was she tested negative for the coronavirus.
Well, it's kind of like the Virgin Mary story. If
Very
it's good enough for
similar.
Jesus, it's good enough for her kid.
Yeah. I just can't imagine that I don't know if you've dealt with a woman in labor, but
Define dealt with.
anything, been around, told them not to come into a hospital where they can safely have a baby. There must have been
I've done that.
There must have been an enormous amount of bowing going on at that moment.
Yeah, I can the funny image for me is the inside of the ambulance where they come back and they're like, "We're really sorry to have to tell you this, but they've told us we're not allowed in." And she's like, "Oh, well, I'm really sorry to have to inconvenience you, but could you drive me to a different hospital?" And then just doing those apologies over and over again until they get in.
And of course, if she starts getting contractions, those are de facto bowels.
Yeah, you don't want to. I'll tell you one thing. If you're in labor and you're trying not to give birth, bowing is the last thing you want to do. That is not going to go well.
So places like Okinawa, which are popular destinations for Golden Week, have actually requested that up to 60,000 tourists cancel their reservations, cancel their plane tickets, and not go to Okinawa. They haven't gone as far as to say we're not going to allow you in, but they're requesting that people completely cancel their travel plans.
I thought that was so funny in the other article, how they were saying that they were telling people to stay home, but there was no punishment for non-compliance. That is just amazing. Like, where in the world can you do that? They're like, but we said please. You know, like, you imagine telling Americans that? You'd be like, all right, you guys, you can stay home, but we're not going to do anything if you don't stay home. Like, in America, they're like, we're going to shoot you if you don't stay home. They're like, well, we're going to come outside with our guns.
Well, I think it depends on which Americans. Have you seen any of the pictures of the protests? I mean, you've got tons and tons of white Americans who are armed with automatic weapons on their backs yelling at police officers about wanting them to open up the economy. So, I mean, you've got a large portion of Americans that you are telling, stay at home, and they're coming out with guns not quite blazing, but ready to blaze if need be.
But in America, I'm pretty sure in plenty of states, you can get a fine if you're outside.
In Malaysia, they're issuing on-the-spot fines.
In Singapore, I know a guy who got an 800 Singapore dollar fine for walking too close to someone on the sidewalk.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
They had a social distancing ambassador handing out tickets for people getting a little too chummy on the as they walk along.
How did he hand out those tickets? Did he have to make a paper airplane and throw them?
Well, they can't come too close to you to give it to you, so I think they have to yell it out across the road.
I'm fighting you. What? Leave it. Hey, thanks very much for listening all the way to the end of this Japan by River Cruise episode 34. If you're new to the podcast, then please make sure to subscribe to this wherever you're listening to it. And if you're old to the podcast, then now would be a perfect time to hit that review button and say something nice about us.
Yes, please leave us a review. 3 stars means not enough fart jokes, and 5 stars means just the perfect amount.
And if you're yearning for more podcast content, then I would like to personally recommend Andy talking about his own podcast.
Thanks, buddy. Yeah, you can check it out. It's called Ho Ho Hong Kong with Vivek Mahbubani, who's a fairly famous Hong Kong comedian.
He's very funny.
Talking about all things Hong Kong. So, you can check it out. It's on every platform that's out there. Every major one anyway. And you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Andy Curtin.
All of the links will be in the description.